have a different brand reaction. These issues of privacy, I think, have been in our collective minds since the early part of the technology era. Here's a clip from a film which the world has largely forgot. It was Amazon Women on the Moon from the 1980s, which hit right on the head a lot of the issues that today we live with every day.
You know, Jerry, it's tough being a single girl in the big city. You meet all kinds of phonies and creeps. That's where this machine comes in handy. I just enter your ID and the central computer will tell me about your background. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, what's uh-oh?
Jerry. Does the name Debbie Rothenberg mean anything to you?
Debbie Rothenberg, oh yeah, I think I went out with her once, twice.
You had sex with her on the second date, and then you never called her again. I hate when guys do that.
It says all that?
The statistics don't paint the picture of a mature man. 12 times you ignored your date at a party to flirt with a more attractive woman. 169 times you feigned interest when a woman was talking about her career. And on 17 occasions, you lied to women, telling them you were really into sushi and Meryl Streep movies. Make that 18 times.
Where do they get these figures?
We were talking about privacy last night, and one of the questions is, our expectations of what privacy is actually got built up over years, and McLuhan, when he was writing, realized that we were beginning to get to the end of privacy as we knew it.
Privacy was almost unknown, even in Shakespeare's day. It came in after that period in the 17th, 18th centuries, and it was dependent upon an architecture that sealed off spaces. People didn't live in private spaces in earlier periods, and it was with the coming of the book and the need for areas in private areas in which to read and study and so on that privacy gradually caught on as a value. I don't think privacy has quite the same meaning in our time that it used to have.
This is one of the reasons that I think cultural institutions play an important role, because we're moving very quickly into an area that needs to be shared and understood with the public. I think it's the reason that this lab worked with the Museum of Modern Art last year. I recently was involved in starting something in San Francisco called the Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, which actually explores a lot of these themes. In our very first show, which we called Open, one of our exhibits actually focused on city-based data. We worked with Stamen Design that was actually there at the beginning, creating crimespotting.org for both San Francisco and Oakland. And we actually watched what it was like when people came in and started relating to some of that city data that came in. These are some of the displays that were there, and this is the Oakland crime spotting application. In preparing for this, I spent some time with Eric, who is the creator of Stamen Design, and he started relating to me what happened when they started working with Oakland to open up their data. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that cities would just share. In fact, originally they screen scraped some data from Oakland, put that into their system, and then one day opened it up and said, here's some data from Oakland, it's an API, and here's what Oakland did.
It got some press, and then within 3 days the city of Oakland found out about it and shut us down. Denied, it's called, I think it's a term, denial of service. They basically would refuse to answer requests from our machine that was doing the scraping. The excuse was that it was excessive load. Of course, it was happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, so not a lot of load, and we had also been doing it for 9 months, and nobody had said anything. So they only really noticed it when they started getting negative press about it. It was mainly talking to them. I mean, we could have very easily gone on a rampage and, sent letters to the New York Times and claiming Freedom of Information Acts and all that kind of stuff. We thought it would be a much better sort of way to go about it, to just keep asking them gently. Having said that, if we had started this whole process off by asking Oakland for data, we probably would still be asking for the data. So there's a kind of ask for forgiveness rather than permission aspect to all this. And I think it's a really sort of interesting, I mean, were they within their legal rights to hold the data? It's not really clear. There is no nationwide policy on what cities ought to provide as API-enabled data to their citizenry. And I think, projects like crime spotting and these kinds of other projects are kind of interesting test bed to see where that's going to go.
There really is a natural caution towards the releasing of data. When I was working on this institution, some of the very first charts that we had showed the crime that was going on in the Tenderloin, and I thought, maybe the neighborhood will get angry at us. And what I missed is that when you open this stuff up, it gives citizens power. And this is something that Eric found soon after they created Oakland Crime Spotting.
Since we've been working on this project, the data is now available to the public, and we've heard reports of neighborhood groups in Oakland downloading that data, making their own maps, charts, and graphs, and taking that to the neighborhood meetings with the cops and saying, here, look, there's been a rash of robberies along Solano Avenue. What are you doing about it? So this idea that by kind of making this data sort of flow in a more transparent way, you start to be able to sort of have and engage in conversations that are just a lot more empowering all around.
So, on first blush, what stories do these city data APIs tell? I had Eric take me on a little bit of tour of what the San Francisco crime spotting app has, and we were able to tour it in a physical display at the Gray Area Gallery.
The kinds of crimes that we have are pink narcotics, purple theft and vandalism, and orange simple assault, aggravated assault, and murder. And you can see from the whole city that there's kind of widely distributed. There's some narcotics, mostly out here in the Haight. There's some theft and vandalism and things like that. And a lot of the aggravated assault is concentrated here in the Tenderloin, some of it up over here. What you can start to see here in the Tenderloin is this incredible massing of orange. All this orange is narcotics. So a little bit up here, a little tiny bit over here, a little bit over here, but really the sort of dense mass of it is down here on kind of Skid Row. And we found that those kinds of crimes kind of often pile up against one another, so there's direct correspondences between one and the other.
And you know, far from creating worse relations between, say, police and organizations, it actually creates delight and a basis for conversation, a data-driven conversation. These are a couple of police officers who actually came by the opening we had looking at the data. And they said things like, that's an arrest that I made. And you could actually see conversations going on between community members and police and almost this happiness that things were open. I had a similar experience. I was working with a colleague on this project, and in the middle of getting ready for this talk, she sends me this email. It's a woman who lives in Oakland. I just used it, unconnected to this project, earlier this week, and was totally shocked to find that there was a murder that occurred nearby. Gads. If it wasn't for crime spotting, I wouldn't even known about it. One wonders why the news media is not elected to own these apps. This is the local news source. And she goes on to point out, just for all of us in the audience, that the murder didn't happen in her neighborhood. They just dumped the body there. But it was for this kind of application that she found it. And here's some other people who are actually looking at some of the aggregate data so you can start seeing where crime's happening in San Francisco.